Welcome to the History with Ali podcast, where we discuss all things history, literature, and media studies. Today, I'm excited to be joined by author, historian, and podcaster Jessica Faulkner, who you may know as Unholy Tudor or as the host of the Herstory podcast. So, Jess, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've been wanting to speak with you for a long time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to be invited on.
Of course. And so, could you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Jess. I live in the UK. Your listeners may know me best as Unholy Tudor. On Instagram, I've been running that for 8 years now. And I'm also the host of the Herstory podcast, which focuses on the lives of brilliant women throughout history. And I am also currently writing my first book, which is about Elizabeth I and Mary I, and it's all about their relationship.
That's remarkable. For our listeners, I didn't know what the book was about until now. So that is very exciting. Wow. So, how did you get into history?
I've always loved history. It's been a passion of mine since I was little. I don't know if everyone knows about Horrible Histories that was aired in the UK in the early 2000s. It really set off my interest. It was really goofy. History was told in a fun way, and it always stuck with me. But it wasn't until I was about 13, 14 when I really got into the Tudors. So you learn about them at school, but it's Henry VIII and his six wives, and that's literally it at primary school. So it's not until I got into high school that I really developed my interest. And it's because my mum introduced me to the HBO series, The Tudors. And I know it's wildly inaccurate and the costumes are somewhat questionable, but it set me on this course because I had to know more about these people and how they inspired this show because it went on for 4 seasons. And from then on, I literally have been addicted, and I now talk about history every single day. So my mum might regret showing me the TV show because it's literally been 10 years for her to listen to me. But that's kind of my path into history. It's Horrible Histories, the Tudors, and my mum.
And was Natalie Dormer's performance what piqued your love for Anne Boleyn?
Yes, I would say it is. I mean, I know people all have their favourite portrayal of Anne Boleyn, and every portrayal of Anne Boleyn is so different. Every actress brings her own kind of flair to it. There's just something about Natalie Dormer's portrayal that really got me. I felt not just on screen but off screen because I read about how she really advocated for Anne. She dyed her hair because they wanted a blonde Anne Boleyn. And it's like, okay, what the hell, blonde? It's not an issue with blonde-haired people, but it's like, come on, Anne Boleyn is known for the dark hair. And she tried to wear contacts but couldn't because she was allergic to something like that. Her portrayal is really kind of what endeared me to Anne. I'd heard about Anne Boleyn from school and the history books, but Natalie Dormer really brought it to life. I feel like out of the portrayals of Anne Boleyn, I mean, Genevieve Bujold is one of my favourites as well. Natalie Dormer really gets the personality, I think, of Anne. She shows the really softer sides of her, which she advocated for in series two, but also showed how prickly she could be. And by the time it's her execution at the end of series two, I cry. I literally stop. I know what's coming, but she just does it so well. And you can't, even if you don't like Anne Boleyn, she does that job so well of even if the Tudor period didn't like her at the time, they all pitied her execution because it was such a weird sight to be seeing a Queen of England be executed. So for me, I would say it is Natalie Dormer that really hits it off for me.
And what is it about the real Anne Boleyn that inspires you so much?
I think it's her as a person, I've always found her very realistic. She has no filter. She doesn't really hide herself away. It's kind of, she is a bit like Marmite, you love me or you hate me. I'm not going to change who I am because you don't like who I am. And I just love that about her. I love that she didn't want to be Henry's mistress. She was like, no, I've got a bit of a better opinion about myself, actually, mate. I'm not gonna just sleep with you and then be discarded. I've seen how you treat all of the others. Not even really how she will have witnessed her sister being treated. It's like Bessie Blount, who gave him a son, and he still discarded her. Anne it was so intelligent and so ahead of her time, and I think that's got a little lost over the last 500 years. It's yes, she could be a bitch. She could be horrible, and we've seen how she treated Mary and Catherine of Aragon. But you need to see the whole bigger picture of her. She thought what she was doing was right. She thought what they were doing was wrong. She's just such a complex person that every day I find something else out that I just find even more interesting about her. The last few years, it's been how much more charitable she was than it's been led to believe, how much more charitable she was than Catherine of Aragon and her successor, Jane Seymour, and how she basically was going to do a Tudor NHS over here if from the dissolution of the monasteries, and it doesn't get talked about. We only talk about her taking Henry away from Catherine of Aragon, which is a whole other debate about is she the other woman. But to sum it up, because I know I'm waffling now, she's just so interesting, and I think you have so much to learn from her, but not just her, all the other wives as well. I have to say it as well.
I think what's so particularly interesting about Anne too is it's kind of said that her beauty isn't what made her so full of life and maybe attractive. She wasn't the normal beauty. Do you think that as well is an interesting part of her story?
Yes, I think that's the biggest thing is it's her personality that won people over. I mean, she could have been attractive. I think it's just she wasn't the attractive of the Tudor beauty standard at the time. It was very much had to have rose auburn hair or blonde, and you kind of more plump in body, where she was a lot more slender. But she had such wit and charisma, and she always made people laugh. And she's said to have had beautiful black eyes, which could dazzle many people. But I think that's why she is so interesting, is because she used her intelligence and personality to the advantage, and she made herself look attractive. She wore the French hood, which made her more attractive. She wore the more flattering French fashions, which would make her look prettier, which we do today. We wear something to make us look more attractive. We put makeup on to look prettier for ourselves, to manipulate our image and how we want to be perceived. And that's exactly what she did. She manipulated her image and it benefited her truly. And I think that's one of the best things about Anne is she was one of the most able politicians of her time.
Speaking of Anne, and this question's particularly for the listeners who don't know about the Tudors, is there a likeness of her from her lifetime?
Yes, that's a brilliant question. So we have more than we realised. So we have a medal and it's a bit damaged, but it's from 1534 and it's when Anne is Queen of England and possibly pregnant after giving birth to Elizabeth. And it's like a commemorative medal, and it's our only real likeness that we have of Anne. We've also got a sketch of Anne on her coronation where Hans Holbein has done a rough sketch, but it's kind of you can, again, it's Anne. We don't actually have many portraits that actually have survived. Actually, we don't have any portraits that we know of that have survived from her lifetime. We possibly have two Hans Holbein sketches where it's not a complete image, but it's a woman side profile and she's got a double chin. Again, it's possibly 1534 where she's pregnant, so it could have been that. And then there's another one that he has also done. So there's one called the Windsor sketch, and I can't for the life of me remember what the other Hans Holbein sketch is, but one or both of them are also possibly from Anne's lifetime. And the other thing we have, which is posthumous, is the Exchequer's ring, which is from Elizabeth I's reign. So when Elizabeth I died, they found this ring. She wore it all the time, and in the ring is two pictures or paintings, and one is of Elizabeth and one is of an unidentified woman. It's been put forward that it could well be her mother, Anne Boleyn. It could be Catherine Parr, who Elizabeth was very close with. It could be someone else that Elizabeth was very close with, but it's most likely that it could have been Anne Boleyn, because when it's been done for analysis, because in the locket it looks like this person's got blonde hair, but they've actually found when they've done testing on it, there was black enamel on it. So it is very likely that it was actually Anne Boleyn. And then we have all these sketches. I mean, behind me, I've got the Hever Rose portrait, which we now know dates from 1583. And we have the National Portrait Gallery, but we sadly don't have any full length, definite pictures of Anne, but we have these tantalizing little goodies which we can go, well, do you know what? We can start to base what she may well have looked like from the medal, from the sketches.
It feels like everything related to Anne is a mystery, especially for history lovers who love going down deep dives. Anne is definitely a worthy subject because it's so mysterious. You have all these letters that Henry sent to Anne when he's trying to woo her, but you don't have Anne's replies. Where's the real Anne amongst all of this for you?
Again, that's a really great question. I think, as you said, Anne Boleyn is such a mystery for people. We don't really know for definite what she looked like. We don't know when she's born. We don't know really the extent of her relationship with Henry. We don't know what she thought about Henry, if she loved Henry, more importantly. We don't really know any of her inner thoughts. We don't have many surviving letters of hers. But I think Anne's voice is still there. We have two of her books of hours. In one of them, it's daily proof, you shall find me to be to you both loving and kind. And it is very well possible that she wrote this while she was with Henry, because we know that they were passing notes to each other in these prayer books. So it's very possible that she said it then. Or, as I quite like to think, did she write it before she was executed? Because she knew the end was near. And I think that's a snippet of Anne's voice. We have Anne in the religious point of view where she really advocated for reform. All her religious texts, her prayer books, the people she surrounded herself with, who then carried on her legacy in the religious world because of Anne, and she was a real stalwart in this. We have Anne when with her relationship with her mother, Elizabeth Boleyn. We see how close she is with her mother when she's courting with Henry VIII. She makes sure her mother is there. She's never alone with Henry. And I think that's really important to note, is that she never risked her reputation with Henry until things were more set with him. We have when she's being arrested, she's more worried about her women and her mother because her mother's not been well recently. We know that caring side of Anne Boleyn from her own words. We have, when she's in the tower, how scared she is. We know she is because her ladies have reported this. The people that has been sent to spy on her, they're not there to care for her. They are sent to spy on her by Cromwell. But we have this very vivid picture of Anne, how scared she is, how paranoid she is, how she's talking about things that have happened, and she's kind of incriminated herself. We have her speech at her trial, where she conducts herself with such grace and dignity. And I think, even though we have the frustrating bits where we don't know her responses really to the letters, we can maybe assume what has been said, but we have Anne in so many more ways. She was such a leading voice in so many aspects. And I think people who loved her and knew her have also carried her voice on for her. With the prayer books, we know that they were circulated among women in Kent, and that's why we have them today, because they have treasured them. Elizabeth I carried on her legacy. We know that Elizabeth did talk about her mother. It's not that she kept her mother sheltered away. It's, no, my mother is Queen Anne Boleyn. We know that Anne Boleyn was a life-size effigy at Elizabeth's coronation. There are so many glimpses into Anne that she's not completely lost from time. And I think that's what makes her more tantalizing, is we do get these really beautiful glimpses into her life when she's alive and in her legacy, because people have carried it on for her.
Beautifully said. So earlier you mentioned your account, Unholy Tudor. Was there a historical moment that inspired you to say, okay, I love this subject, but now I want to become a part of the conversation today about this subject, particularly Anne Boleyn, but I know that you also focus on the Tudors and Wars of the Roses.
Yes, so I was 16 when I set up my account on social media. And at the time, it was because I didn't really have anyone to speak to about Tudor history. And I was like, I kind of want to make friends on the online community, because I need to voice these thoughts and opinions that I have on this period. And I did genuinely set it up because of Anne Boleyn. I was so fascinated by her that I kind of wanted to see what everyone else thought about her. But the main reason why I wanted to be a voice in the community is, I'm going to try not to cry now, but I was assaulted when I was 14, and it kind of really messed my education up. I didn't get my GCSEs, which in the UK is, and I wanted to prove that you didn't need qualifications to have a leading voice in this community. And that is the primary reason why I have Unholy Tudor on the podcast, is because, yes, it's great if you've got a degree, GCSEs, PhD, a master's, and I'm not decrying anyone that's got that. I'm currently working for a degree in history. But when I was 16, it was because I wanted to prove that the research I had done for 2 years by that point was really hard work. I had looked at sources at a young age, and I've worked with historians since. And I don't think you need a degree to define you in this community. Every voice is valid, and I hope my account has kind of been that for people. I want people to love history, learn history, enjoy my account, and have fun with it, because I'm very silly on there. You've seen me, Ali. I post everything and anything on there. I post birthday photos where I'm literally posing in front of historical property. I did that this week. I post book reviews. I post videos with all my Anne Boleyn stuff going, how to spot a Tudor nerd, because my room's actually terrifying. It's got so much stuff about Anne Boleyn in there. I was looking at it yesterday, I was like, oh my God, I need to maybe get out a little bit more. But it's just so important, and especially with stuff that seems to be going on in the history community at the moment. A lot of people are going, well, you haven't got a degree, so why are you talking about this? Because I've been researching it for 10 years and I know what I'm talking about by this point. And so do so many other people. It's just because you haven't got the qualification doesn't mean you're not qualified. If you started quoting the HBO series The Tudors to me, I would be ever so slightly concerned. But it's just not the case. It's just not the case anymore. And I think it's so important to have history be accessible for everyone.
I'm so sorry that happened to you, and thank you for sharing. And I think you're at least a decade younger than I am. And so, as a protective older friend, just give me the name and number. But seriously, that's beautiful to find passion during your most difficult time of life. Then it turned into something where you're a huge part of the community. You're not just like someone in the community, you're on a pedestal. We love your account. That's someone my age who, how old are you, if I may ask?
I turned 24 on Wednesday.
Okay, I'm turning 36. And I think most of my followers, when I do see the analytics, are on the older side. I don't know if that's true for you too, but I feel like the Tudor community is a little older. So you're bringing joy and happiness to it. And I mean, it's a pretty dark subject anyway. There's a ton of domestic abuse and literal murder. So it maybe you have to understand darkness to understand the lightness with the Tudors. So thank you for sharing that. But I guess that's a kind of a perfect segue is that sometimes I get jealous on this side of the ocean because I see the history community in England coming alive, and you guys go to book signings and exhibits and history festivals. What's it like to be actually a part of a real community in real life?
It's phenomenal, honestly. I mean, as we were just saying about what happened, I genuinely, and I'm not saying this for attention, I did not think I'd be alive today. Seriously, like I did not think that. I did not think I would come out of it the other side. But I have because I fought for it. And kind of history kind of was one of my saving graces. But to have such incredible friends in this community, it's phenomenal. I mean, I've been invited to where Ghosts was filmed, the UK version, for a history festival at the end of the month. And I'm like, how is this happening? How am I being invited to this? My silly little account. What is going on? And you have the wonderful Dr. Owen Emerson, who gave us a tour of Hever Castle in April. And he took us on the roof. And I was like, how am I here? What is going on? And it's so wonderful. And there are so many beautiful people in the UK, in the history community, that are so genuinely lovely. And when you meet up, it's like, fellow nerd, oh my God. You know, there's no like pretense. It's like, okay, let's go nerd out about Anne Boleyn then. Let's go. Let's go. And that's literally me. I am the nerd at every single history festival and book signing. I can't play it cool at all. I go, oh, hello. It's literally me. I don't know how to play it cool. And maybe people like that because I'm like literally starstruck by Owen Emerson, Tracy Borman. I'm like just standing and staring at you. For me, they're like the top tier of like David Tennant. For me, they are that high up in the history community. So I'm like, I literally feel like I'm mixing with royalty. But I have so many wonderful friends like the Catherine Parr Society. Beautiful, beautiful Bonnie. She's so great. Brings Catherine Parr to life, who, again, needs that platform, and Bonnie is there for it. You have Lizzie from the Historical Gal Society, who's bought Bloody Brilliant Tudors, is bloody brilliant. It's absolutely incredible. And it's just so great to be around people that think the same as you, have the same thoughts, and are going to the same stuff because you don't feel alone in this process. I think sometimes content creation can feel really lonely, and podcasting can feel quite lonely because you're just at home on your own, and getting to do stuff like this, it's like, oh my God, I have friends in this community and people that are like me. And it is very heartwarming, and it's just absolutely amazing.
And yeah, I'm really jealous. I cannot wait to come over. I hope you all come out when I'm like, hey, I'm going to be in London here then because I got to meet you all. And I do feel like mental health is definitely something that I see being spoken about in that group as well, which can be really inspiring. I think I saw that Dr. Owen did a walk and Anne Boleyn Society has spoken about mental health, and so that's so important, especially as
Yeah.
well. Men talking about mental health is huge because it's a little bit more rare. So one of the other perks of you being across the pond is that you get to go to heritage sites. And I notice it seems like that's your favorite thing to do when not working. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I spend my weekends at historic properties. I can't not be there. You've got the greats, Tower of London, Hampton Court Palace. I don't live near them. I mean, I am 2 hours away on a train, which is 2 hours too long. But it is so great to have this history at your fingertips because I know, as you say, you're across the pond, you don't get to experience this all the time. So it feels like for me, like I've got to show you all this because I can't gatekeep this.
Thank
I'm going
you. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it so
to.
much. Yeah.
I went to the Tower of London on the 19th of May this year for Anne Boleyn's 490th execution anniversary date. And I was like, you're all coming with me. Come on, let's go. And I literally dressed like Anne Boleyn. I realised as I went, oh, I did not realise how much I have dressed like her today. Oops. But I didn't care because I was at the Tower of London. And I think it's great to show historical properties for everyone because you don't know if people have got physical issues that they can't, mobility issues, so they can't maybe get to these properties even if they live in the UK because a lot of them don't have lifts, which is always a problem. And I think it's great to experience it with someone else. I take my partner to most of this. He's not that willing, I will admit that. But it's so great to experience. I went to Little Morton Hall on my birthday, which was on Wednesday. I think I've said that already, but I'll say it again. And I wanted everyone else to kind of experience it because it's such a beautiful hidden gem in Cheshire, which is in the UK, where I'm in that area. And I just love sharing it with people because I think it's so fun. It's like, look, I've been here today. This is some of the history of it. Here's some relatively decent photos because sometimes my hand is shaking trying to get a really good angle of a photo. But I think it's so important to share them because people want to experience it with you. They don't just want to see the information posts and book reviews. They kind of want to feel like they've transported there with you, which I hope I try and do that on my account.
You do, and I think especially you going on the anniversary of the execution really meant a lot to all of us in the rest of the world because, of course, we couldn't go there. And it looks like that post actually went pretty viral too.
Yeah, I was a bit like, what's going on? It was really surreal. I did cry. I'll admit that now. I cried. It was so surreal. I've been to the tower a ridiculous amount of times now. And I went last year on the Anne Boleyn's execution as well, but there's something different about it this year. I think maybe it was because it was the 490th. It felt a lot different. And I just kind of so I lit one of the videos I lit a candle in the chapel where she's laid to rest. And then I did flowers on the Tower Green Memorial, which isn't where she was executed. We now know that she was executed in front of the crown jewels, but that memorial is what kind of like a commemorative thing. So that's where I left the flowers. And I think maybe it was important for people to see that because she does mean a lot to people. I know that she's a woman that was executed 490 years ago, but she inspires a lot of people. She's inspired me. And I was a bit like, I think people need to experience this today, whether it's a post, a reel, a story on Instagram. I think it was important, and I hope that people found it as moving as I felt that day.
I felt very moved. So, how did you come up with the name Unholy Tudor?
I love this question. So, when I was kind of like researching the Tudors, obviously there's a lot about religion and the dissolution of the monasteries and Edward changing it to Protestantism. And then Mary restores it to the Catholic faith, and then Elizabeth takes a more neutral approach, and Henry VII obviously is Catholic England. And as I was researching, I was a bit like, they're not very holy, are they, really? I was a bit like, bit of a contradiction. And then I knew I wanted my account to be about the Tudors, and I wanted it to be a unique name. So I somehow landed on Unholy Tudor, and I don't know really where that came from, I've got to be honest. It was kind of like a combination. Well, Henry VIII is like the biggest walking religious contradiction I've ever met. And I kind of landed on that, and then I was a bit, and as time's gone on, I've always been a bit like, does it work, the name? But people seem to find it quite funny. They think it's quite ironic and clever. So something clearly worked right when I was 16 and I was thinking of that name. Because I obviously also have on there my actual name in the bio. But I just think it's quite a fun, quirky name, and I think it does stand out. So I landed on it because I just thought there's such an irony about, oh, look how religious we are. It's like, you're actually really not. You're really not. Stop messing it up.
That is so cool that you were only 16 when you came up with that. What a cool teenager. Oh my goodness gracious. Mine would have been like crazy. It would have been back in the AOL days, so let's not even go there. But wow, it's amazing that you started your journey so much earlier. So what can you tell our guests about your podcast, Herstory?
Yes. So I started podcasting about 2.5 years ago. I started in November 2023. I love listening to podcasts. I sometimes prefer listening to them compared to music. I love Talking Tudors by Natalie Grueninger. She's such a fabulous historian and podcaster. I love Not Just the Tudors by Professor Sanna Lipscomb, again, another wonderful historian. But then I love like Gone Medieval and You're Dead to Me by Greg Jenner, which is such a funny podcast. He also helped write Horrible Histories, so I kind of get that Horrible Histories fix in there for me. And I was kind of like, maybe I could do it. I'm the most shy person you can meet. If you meet me in person, I'm a very socially awkward person. I'm not being rude, I'm just really anxious and awkward. I'm an introvert at heart. And I thought I could do this. Maybe I could. Because I love talking to people about history. And I thought maybe I could do a Tudor podcast. And it did start as the Tudor Herstory. And it was the Tudor Herstory up until spring of last year, when I was like, well, you know what? I want to challenge myself and I want to make this a broader aspect. Why don't I do all women in history? Because there are so many women, not just in the Tudor period, that are absolutely fascinating. And it does take me out of my comfort zone because I feel very comfortable in the Tudor period. I feel like even if I don't know a particular woman, I know some background information. So when I'm researching Carolina Brunswick, I feel completely out of my comfort zone. I'm like, God, there's so much source material. How do I even ask a question? There's just too much going on. Where's the limited source materials from this period? There's too much. And to be honest, I'm so glad I did. It's one of the best decisions I have ever made. It's brought me so much confidence. I've had the privilege, the utter privilege to speak to some incredible people. I mean, I've Tracy Borman on the podcast. How? It's such a privilege to do it, and I love the little community it's got. And I love seeing all the comments like, I love this episode. Please can you try and get this person on? It's just been so wonderful doing it, and I have honestly not looked back. I have not regretted starting the podcast.
And you mentioned it at the top, but could you tell us about the book that you're writing?
Yes, to be honest, since I was little, I've always wanted to be an author of some sort. I was always writing short stories as a kid. I loved English, art, and history. That was my thing since I was little. And I always knew once I got into the history community and period, I was like, I need to write a book on Tudor history. Don't know what it's going to be about, but I need to do it. But I never did. I'm always teaming with ideas. I'm teaming with ideas for more books, even though I've not finished writing this one. When Pen and Sword approached me about writing this book about an idea I spoke about to someone else, and it's about Elizabeth I and Mary I, and it's all about their relationship. And I kind of what inspired me really, that idea was I wanted to understand the two women as individuals, but also I wanted to understand their relationship a lot more, because I feel we get fed a very big narrative of Mary and Elizabeth hated each other, especially when Mary becomes queen. And I've not found anything groundbreaking. This is not going to be, I have found a new source, or this is new evidence. I'm reevaluating what we have, because I think we have been fed a very different image to what actually went on. Mary and Elizabeth actually had a very tender relationship. We have a lot of evidence for this. Their relationship only sours once Mary becomes queen. It's when that sours. Prior to that, it is a solid relationship. Mary is effectively a mother to Elizabeth. Elizabeth only really knows Mary as a mother figure up until Cat Astley and Catherine Parr. Mary is again another mother figure for her. And Mary was such a loving person, and I wanted to understand that more, because obviously she had a lot of trauma growing up. And obviously she did not like Anne Boleyn. We've seen that in the sources. But she loved Elizabeth and really cared about her. And when Anne is executed, Mary takes it upon herself. She's like, well, this poor girl has no mum. This is awful. And when Henry has a son, Edward, he seems to forget about Elizabeth pretty much entirely. I'm not saying she was like in squalor. She was like the first few months after Anne's execution, Elizabeth hasn't got any money for new clothes. And we actually see that Mary gives money to Elizabeth's household for Elizabeth to have new clothes, because she's outgrown them so quickly. And it's not talked about enough. I think that's what really started getting me on a roll, because I was like, why don't we talk about this more? We talk about Elizabeth being thrown in the Tower. We talk about her being released from the Tower on the 19th of May, 1554. And like, oh God, Mary must have really hated her. That must have been so calculating of Mary. And it's like, well, I think there's more to it than that. We've pitted them against each other before Elizabeth was even born. And that I kind of hope I've reevaluated them and their relationship, because a big chunk of the book as well is actually, before I even discuss Mary and Elizabeth, the first two chapters are about Mary, because you can't get to Mary and Elizabeth without getting through Mary first, because she has 17 years before Elizabeth is born. So I talk about Mary's childhood and her relationship with her father and mother, and then it's the Great Matter. And then obviously it's when Elizabeth comes into the picture. But I hope people reevaluate both of them as individuals, but their relationship as well. And I hope it strikes up a conversation about how we have pitted these two women, especially, against each other, because they should have been rivals. Their mothers were rivals. Well, they weren't really rivals, but what we need to stop doing this. They were two women who had to navigate really difficult politics, and they had to navigate a father who was awful to them. And Edward, he was awful to Edward as well. He was rubbish. He was a rubbish dad. And I hope this book really does strike up a conversation about how complex these women were, but how much more tender their relationship was. So I hope in the book that does come across.
That's interesting. I've always been interested in historiography, which is the history of how history was written. So I do think there is a lot of room to reevaluate what we do know about their relationship and give it some fresh eyes.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I'm not claiming that I have found new evidence. I'm looking back at the evidence that we do have and giving it a reevaluation, because we actually haven't done a book. I don't think there has been a book on their relationship, like solely their relationship. We've had Young Elizabeth by Dr. Nicola Tallis, which is a fantastic book, but it's about Elizabeth. We have wonderful biographies about Mary where Elizabeth is in it, but we don't talk about their relationship. It's, well, this happened and this happened. We need to explore that more, because they were two queens. Mary's the first official Queen of England, if you don't count Jane Grey and Matilda. Mary set Elizabeth up for a good queenship as well, and I don't think that gets talked about enough. We treat Mary as a bit of a disaster queen, and actually, if we look at her reign, yes, there was quite a bit of bloodshed, shall we say, or fires, but she also boosted the treasury, boosted the navy. She did a lot of clever things, and she also brought in a act, and I can't remember the exact act, but it's basically bolstered Elizabeth's queenship when she came in. It was, I'm a queen unchallenged kind of thing. And Mary brought that in. Not Henry, not Edward, Mary, because Mary knew Elizabeth was going to be her successor, because Mary sadly just couldn't have a child for whatever reason. Mary set Elizabeth up for life. And again, that is another act of their sisterhood. Mary made sure Elizabeth's reign and ascension would go unchallenged. She is my successor. She is going to be Queen of England. This is not being challenged.
And Mary did not force Elizabeth into marriage. And that's a big one, because politically, that was a huge pawn for her, and she did not do it.
Yeah, exactly. We see a lot of Elizabeth's refuses from a very early age that she's not marrying, and there's been a lot of discussions about why does she make that decision, and I think that's probably another chat entirely. It's because hers is so complex. I think maybe towards the end of Mary's queenship, once Mary's married Philip, I think Mary is a bit scared of Elizabeth. Not like, oh, I'm terrified of her, but because people had used Jane Grey as a pawn so effectively, Mary was worried about this was going to happen with Elizabeth. So if Elizabeth did marry to someone she didn't want, they could uprise against her. And Elizabeth was really stubborn as well. Elizabeth was like, I'm not marrying. I mean, Philip, Mary's husband, was like, oh yeah, you could marry this guy. And she's like, no, I don't want to. Mary kind of learns from her own marriage mistakes, I think, even though she does seem to have absolutely adored Philip, and he did not deserve her. He was horrible. She didn't want Elizabeth to make the same mistake. She didn't want Elizabeth to be trapped in a bit of a loveless marriage, I think. I think Elizabeth's hand was too high a price just to send to Sweden or something. Because what if Sweden goes, you know what, we're going to rise up against you. You've got no children, Mary, so I'm going to rise up against you, and your sister's going to be the figurehead. I think Mary couldn't take that risk for multiple reasons.
To me, that's the actual curse of the Tudors, that they were so scared of losing power that they didn't have a next generation. It always blows my mind that Henry wouldn't have married off his daughters when they were more younger and more possibility of giving birth to children, but all of the Tudors were afraid of their heirs having heirs. Maybe that goes back to War of the Roses, but because of all this paranoia, there is no third generation.
Yeah, exactly. There's a real thing when we talk about Tudor paranoia is there is such paranoia when it comes to the Tudors. So for anyone that doesn't know, I'll briefly explain. The Tudors come in at the Battle of Bosworth. Henry VII, the founder, or yes, he is the founder. He kind of sets it up. He wins the War of the Roses. He wins at the Battle of Bosworth against Richard III. And when he wins, He marries Elizabeth of York, he unites the two houses, and then the Tudor Rose is created. But because they are relatively seen as upstarts, because their claim is not as legitimate, Henry VII is very paranoid. And even though he has two sons, he has two sons, two daughters, he gets very paranoid. He has two uprisings against him. He has Lambert Simnel, who is claimed to have been Edward, Earl of Warwick, who is George, Duke of Clarence's son. But we know that his Edward, Earl of Warwick, was in the Tower when this uprising happened, so it wasn't him. And then you have another uprising against Henry VII with Perkin Warbeck, and he claimed to be the younger of the two princes in the Tower. And that's, again, another huge debate. Wasn't he actually the prince? But Henry VII really got this paranoia. And then obviously Arthur dies in 1502, and that was a tragedy. He shouldn't have died. So you only have one heir. So it's instilled in Henry VIII that you need an heir. You need multiple heirs. You can't just have one boy or two boys. You need at least four, just to be safe. You can't take the risk. And then obviously Catherine of Aragon, bless her, seems to have had some issues with children staying alive, apart from Mary. And then the same happens with Anne Boleyn. And that's why Henry VIII is divorcing Catherine of Aragon, is because he's so paranoid about England disrupting again into civil war, because it really wasn't that long ago since the War of the Roses, so it was still such a fresh thing. And then obviously he has Edward, and it's like, okay, we're slightly a bit more secure now, but I still need another son because I've seen literally what has happened. My brother died, and obviously we know Edward dies young. We don't see Edward be very... Actually, no, we do. I would say we don't see Edward be paranoid. We do, because he literally cuts his sisters out of succession. Because he doesn't want Mary to be on the throne because she's Catholic. And then we see Mary is more pragmatic. She does get paranoid. We see that she gets a lot more worried about Elizabeth. But she is close with the Grey cousins who survived, Catherine and Mary. It's when Elizabeth comes to the throne, I think the Tudor paranoia really embodies itself again. She's quite frank, Elizabeth's quite horrible as queen to her women. The Grey cousins, so when Jane Grey is executed, she's still got two more sisters. And Catherine and Mary both marry, and they are imprisoned because they married without her permission. But Catherine had two sons with this husband that they said wasn't her husband. And they could have been legitimate heirs if Elizabeth decided to go with that line. And she's quite right. If she named a successor, they'd all start trying to court favour with the successor. Completely understand that. She would have saved so much issues though, like if she actually just got married and had a kid. You would have saved us a lot of time here, babe. Like, come on. And then it goes to James I. It's like, you killed his mum. What are you doing? For me, because I read Stolen Crown by Tracy Borman, which is all about the heirs, it made so much more sense to go with the Greys. Catherine Grey's sons had a really good claim to the throne. I'm just like, why are you all too paranoid to actually think with a bit of sense? Like, come on, it would have been easy.
Maybe if the Grey father wasn't such a fool, history could be different. Could you tell our listeners where they can find you online?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram as Unholy Tudor. I'm also on TikTok and YouTube, both as Unholy Tudor as well. I also have Substack, where I do more written pieces on there, which is also under Unholy Tudor. And I'm also on Facebook again, under Unholy Tudor. I've just found it easier just to have all the same handles. But for the podcast, I have an Instagram, Herstory podcast on Insta. And I am on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. I'm on quite a few platforms. I think if you search me up, you'll find me. And if you ever have any questions, my email is unholytudor@gmail.com. I love to receive questions, so fire away. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
And last question, what fiction or nonfiction Tudor book would you recommend to someone who's never read about the Tudors before?
That's a great question. And I read too many books. What I started off with when I was 14 was Alison Weir's King and Court and The Six Wives of Henry VIII. They were like great starters for me. The other was Anne Boleyn by the late Eric Ives. His book was another lifesaver for me. And the other one that I loved, I remember it because my nana bought me them for my 15th birthday. It's the Letters and Papers of Anne Boleyn by Dr. Elizabeth Norton. It's a fabulous book and it gives you such a much more close insight into Anne and also Into the Footsteps of Anne Boleyn by Natalie Grueniger and Sarah Morris. They've also done another one where they do it in the footsteps of the Six Wives. It's just so great. If you don't live in the UK, you feel like you are walking in their footsteps by reading it. So yeah, I think if you're new to Tudor history, they would be some of my top recs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess, for coming on. It truly was an honor to have you on here. And thank you so much for talking about your vulnerabilities and your passion for the subject. And I learned a lot about it too. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today. I've had a lovely time.
Thanks for listening to the History with Ali podcast. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at History with Ali. See you next time.